So the Hornets play their first game since LaMelo Ball fractured his ankle. How did the offense look? Plus, it was KD's debut with Phoenix. We'll discuss all of it today on Locked On Hornets.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I couldn't keep it together. Right before the graphic unveiled all of us, me, Doug Branson, Nick Carboni. I mean, photo finish, just phlegm session from Doug, where it looked like he was about to die, or it sounded like he was about to die. Nothing. It's all good. I didn't mean to call you out, but at the same time, you've called me out for the past 2 weeks, so zero problem here. It's Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. You heard the guest, Nick Carboni. Find him on Twitter at Nick Carboni, WCNC. We appreciate the time once again, Nick. It's going to be kind of tough to talk about this Hornets offense without LaMelo, but we can start off with some good news that LaMelo Ball did undergo successful surgery. That news drop happened from the Hornets during the game, 5 minutes into it, 10 minutes after the game actually started. But as long as it's successful, that's A-okay with me. What have you been hearing, at least, with you being the integrity journalist around these parts while we just don't do that kind of thing? What have you been hearing within the Charlotte Hornets organization and just kind of how all of this happened post fractured right ankle for LaMelo?
Yeah, I think my biggest question, even before the fractured right ankle, was what is going on with LaMelo's ankles in general? I think he had 3 sprains of that left ankle over the course of preseason throughout the regular season, and that's why he missed all the time he did before. Now he's going to miss the final 18 or 19 games or whatever it is. So is there an issue there that needs to be looked at going forward? I asked Steve Clifford after the game just about the fact that he's got 4 significant ankle injuries now. I know the 4th one is a different injury. It's to a different ankle. What has he seen from the training staff, trying to prevent these things? And I didn't ask it in a way that's, pointed towards the training staff, because I know a lot of people, as soon as similar injuries crop up a few times, want to jump to that. But I think LaMelo, his team, this team needs to take a real look at what happened with the ankles in the 2022-23 season and prevent that from happening going forward. Looked at a lot of what Steph Curry went through early in his career. I mean, he had a handful of ankle sprains in the first couple of seasons, knocked him out for a good chunk of time. He had to go through a lot to come back from that, and I hope that's not the path that LaMelo has to take. But if it is, Steph Curry turned out okay. It's just, is that what's going to have to happen? And what Steph Curry had to eventually do after having successful surgery, which was later deemed unsuccessful, he had to have.
So it happens, is what you're saying? Sometimes the unsuccessful surgery happens? Okay.
Successful, it means, he got through it. They did it on the right ankle, and it looks good. It's a fracture also. I'm not a doctor, but that's a simpler fix than, tendons, ligaments, other things that you could do to that part of the body. But he had to undergo, full ankle reconstruction. I don't think, I haven't heard anything like that is coming down the pike for LaMelo. And as far as I know, it was his wrist his rookie year.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't like this was happening the first 2 seasons, but it happened enough this season to warrant some concern. And I think at least taking a better look at trying to prevent it from happening in the future.
It's a good point. The fact that it just all hit us right in the face this season. And Steph Curry, that kind of happened over the course of multiple years, right? That happened
the first couple of years to him. Yeah.
So I don't know what to make of that. We just know that once it happened preseason, boom, 3 ankle sprains, 1 ankle getting fractured on the other side. Yeah, it's a huge problem. Anything to take away from the successful surgery part here and the official confirmation we kind of touched on yesterday, Doug, but he is going to miss the last 19, now 18 after the Phoenix Suns loss.
Well, we know if there's any player that's going to be able to come back from this, it's going to be a player who is obsessed with basketball, and that's LaMelo Ball. He's obsessed with basketball. He's going to want to get back on the floor as soon as he's healthy, get back in the gym, and restore this ankle to 100%. And now, he gets there's no pressure at this point to get back on the floor. I think that's super important. Now he can focus fully 100% on getting both ankles really back to 100%. So that's super important. I think the interesting thing on the Clifford point that Nick made about the training staff, because Clifford was very quick to defend the training staff. Like, we got a top-notch training staff. I think what's interesting about that is that, the training staff's job, I think, is to maintain players while they're actively playing with the organization, in season. It's probably different than how it used to be, where a team's training staff was really responsible for helping players, all through the calendar year, where the training staff was the main conduit for a player and a team. But now, all these players, especially during the offseason, have their own training. Especially the top tier players, have their own training staffs that are working on their bodies when the team really has nothing to do with it. And I think that there are some questions about, is LaMelo, is his strength around his ankles and his legs, is it strong enough? And I don't know that that's a question that a team's training staff can totally answer, because these guys have their own people and they're responsible for their own bodies. So I think it's an important story to pay attention to. How does his body develop to counteract some of these injuries that he's gotten early in his career?
Well, I haven't heard that either, right? I don't know. Has there been something about LaMelo having his own camp and Kawhi Leonard-esque, if you will? Like, I don't know if I've heard anything like that.
I haven't heard anything like medical-wise.
Right. Right.
But, I think Doug kind of alluded to it, development, strengthening, making sure that part of the body is good. Take it back to Steph Curry again. Another thing that he did was he and his kind of team of people away from his team figured out how to take the pressure from his ankles and move it to a different part of his body. Not saying that's what needs to be done here, but I think what Doug is saying, it's a great point, and it translates to every part of LaMelo's team, and he's certainly got other people around him that are kind of helping him through this process.
If he does, I don't know if he does or not. If he doesn't, maybe that's something to look into. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, and
I'm just saying that's more. What I'm saying is it's more. I think it's more complicated than just pointing fingers at a training staff. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I understand why Steve Clifford would defend it. And let's not forget, the other point is, the training staff, they did clear LaMelo Ball the second sprain that he had this season, and LaMelo did not want to come back. And so this is not a training staff or a coaching staff or an organization that's forcing him to come back. LaMelo decided that he wasn't ready. And so maybe that was informed by camp. That was just a legitimate, ignorant question on my part. I just don't know. So, that's I
accept your ignorance.
Yeah. It's
claim my own ignorance. Nick's the one over here doing all kinds of ankle research. Let him. He's the doctor. He's the doctor of this podcast. Let him answer it.
Well, and he was talking about applying pressure not on the ankles, but it was actually on the hips, is what Steph Curry was discussing at the beginning of this. At the beginning of his career,
in the hips. It's all in the hips.
And there you go. With that, we can move on to the next segment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Let's discuss the offense and how they can manufacture some points. Without LaMelo Ball, it is going to be difficult, but Steve Clifford did have some comments after the game trying to help that end of the court. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the post-All-Star break portion of the NBA season. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. More to come. Locked On Hornets
is Locked On Hornets.
I know a lot about the weight room. I know a ton about the weight. I don't lift a lot of weights, but I do kind of stand around the weight room. Are you using that? You're good? Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I stand around the weight room a lot.
Do you have the high socks and the headband on with your hair tied back?
Oh yeah, big like white tube socks for sure. Yeah, headband. Yeah, I've got it all. I've got these headphones right here that you see me wearing on YouTube right now. I take these into the gym. So I'm just, it's about looking professional. You got to look the part, right? Dress for the job that you want. That's how I feel about how I am in the weight room.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
I saw a stat Rob Longo tweeted out yesterday after the Phoenix Suns loss, and Rob Longo works for the Hornets. You can hear him on the Hornets broadcast, WFNZ 92.7 FM. But Rob Longo tweeted out that it was the 9th time the Hornets had not reached 100 points this season. 8 of those games included a LaMelo Ball absence. And we've gone through the numbers before. When LaMelo is off of the floor, the offense tanks. It is atrocious. And we've discussed just quite a bit how good he is individually. And Steve Clifford credited his shot creation, him being able to come up with a couple of shots when the offense bogs down, but also, of course, creating offense for the entire team, allowing the best to come out of Mark Williams and all these other players. So he discussed trying to manufacture some offense, having Gordon Hayward be a pick and roll ball handler. Terry Rozier was hitting some tough shots early, but it's the kind of shot where you just tip your hat off to Terry Rozier and understand that's not something that can consistently happen throughout the course of a game because he's just going, it's too physical, right? Like it's impressive, but people are draped all over him. He's doing everything he can. So the where we're sitting baseline. He's doing everything he can just to create space physically, getting downhill and then hitting tough shots. It was the first quarter where he was hitting really tough shots. And if that's what you're going to have to bank on in order to score a bucket, I mean, it's going to be tough to get to 100 points. Nick, what did you notice from the offense last night?
I'll even go back to the Detroit game when LaMelo went out. I mean, there's all sorts of analytics behind the pace and the points between when LaMelo is on the floor and when he's off, but it's also right there in front of you. It's the eye test. And it was immediate against Detroit. They had this big lead. He goes out. I'm sure some of it was like, okay, LaMelo's out again. It kind of rattled them. But the offense immediately went kaput. I mean, they were a complete mess. Detroit got back into that game, and Charlotte had to kind of rein itself in and settle finally to put that game away. Against Phoenix, I mean, it was just what we noticed, the first 27 games or whatever it was that LaMelo missed. The pace isn't there. The ability to get the ball around the floor, spread it around, isn't there. Dribble penetration and kicking it. I mean, just the things that LaMelo does and you can't replace. And oh, by the way, he's also hitting shots from outside, and that's a problem when he's out on the floor as well. So you're right. You see Terry Rozier and Kelly Oubre basically just making up ways to get buckets at times, and honestly being kind of impressive doing it. When they're not hitting threes, they're able to take it to the cup, take some difficult shots, finish some of them, but it's going to result in games that you're not scoring 100 points more often than not over these last 18.
Yeah, Doug, I mean, Nick was talking about the shooting LaMelo provides, and Kelly Oubre, Terry Rozier, as much as you rely on them offensively, 3 of 9 from three-point range, 3 of 10 for Kelly, three-point range as well. Gordon Hayward went 3 of 8. So the shooting is also something that they're going to be missing from LaMelo.
Yeah, and I'll go to something that Steve Clifford said after the game. Like, they're not going to score 135 points without LaMelo Ball, but they're probably going to score more than, 91? Like, I think they're probably capped at around 115. Maybe they get a little bit more than that if everybody is firing on all cylinders. But you're obviously missing LaMelo Ball's scoring. He was scoring about 25 points a game over the past 6 or 7 games. And sometimes he does that efficiently, and sometimes he does that inefficiently. But when he does it inefficiently, he's also assisting a lot. He's also making other players better, so you're missing that. When you miss LaMelo Ball, though, really, you're missing some of the knock-on effects, or really things start to domino, and you make changes because LaMelo's out, and I think that hurts your offense. I'll give you one example. Gordon Hayward was 5 of 14 in this game, 3 of 8 from the field, 15 points. But I didn't think he looked anything like the Gordon Hayward that we saw the past couple of games with LaMelo Ball, who was aggressive, getting mid-range, open mid-range shots and knocking them down. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that when LaMelo's out, they've got to look for more people to be shot creators for others. And I think so. To me, Gordon Hayward was focusing more on moving the basketball rather than shooting the basketball. So that's going to take him out of his rhythm. Obviously, Terry Rozier has to play point guard. You move Kelly Oubre because you don't have PJ Washington. You got to keep JT Thor in the starting lineup. So you move Kelly Oubre off the bench. Well, now all of a sudden the bench is back to that anemic offensive bench that we knew when Kelly was out. I mean, you got 8 points from Dennis Smith Jr. Bryce McGowan's only added 3, 4 from Kai Richards and 2 from Kai Jones and 2 from Nick Richards. So all of these sort of domino effects happen when LaMelo's out on the floor, and that's because LaMelo is a super important player to what they do.
Well, and Steve Clifford talked about when PJ Washington comes back, that is going to help a considerable amount. And then I think with him included, that's where you're trying to hit 115. I mean, even with PJ, you don't hit 130, but without LaMelo and PJ, that's when I think you can hit the 115. Yeah. And he was on the incline there. I mean, he had been scoring 20 points in 4 straight games, 5 of the last 6, shooting really well. We were on the up and up on the PJ coaster that can be what he experiences throughout the season. So him coming back will help. And Doug, I mean, they're just running pick and roll a ton with Gordon and, Terry a little bit too. But Mark Williams is setting a million screens. And that's something Steve Clifford talked about after the game, saying their pick and roll numbers are actually good. If you go back and look at the numbers now, I did not check him on that, but the pick and roll numbers are good with Mark Williams setting screens for whether it is Gordon Hayward, certainly LaMelo Ball being the primary ball handler there. And so, Nick, I'll ask you, just with Gordon Hayward, his play I don't know if it's gone completely unnoticed. We've talked about it a little bit, but he had been playing a lot better recently, and Doug kind of credited LaMelo for some of that help. But how big is Gordon Hayward going to have to be down the stretch here to finish with any kind of competency offensively?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, settling the team over these last 18 games. And I think when I point to that Detroit game and the team got rattled and the offense kind of fell way off without LaMelo, I think Gordon Hayward was one of the guys that kind of, took the reins and helped the team get to the finish line. I think he's got the ability to do that, as a leader and as a player as well. Yeah, it has been nice to see. It seems like since the trade deadline and all of that was kind of settled and we knew Gordon Hayward was going to be here. He knew he was going to be here. I'm not sure how much, chance there was of him not being here or how much he thought things might change for him, but it does seem like things have settled since then. He's been hitting shots. He has been efficient, and he's been doing the things. And when healthy, that they talk about in terms of being a connector and being somebody that can professional bucket getter from a certain spot. Man, I mean that guy has his spot. He has his shots. Yeah, and he makes them more often than not when he's healthy.
And I just think the ball handling from Gordon, it kind of goes to show you, Doug, before we move on. When LaMelo's out, man, it goes to show you the lack of depth this team really has playmaking. And it was nice. I mean, when I was not frustrated, but when I thought this team would get worse without Devontae, it was because I thought Devontae Graham was a really good passer on top of the shooting, and eventually the shooting kind of went away. But having both of those guys in the backcourt to play make for others, I thought that was valuable. It's why I would value another point guard here. It's why I like Dennis Smith Jr. offensively, even though we just know the shooting, it's not there for him. And so that really hurts. But think about all the other players, right? Gordon Hayward is your next best option as a passer, and it's not close. It's not. After that, who else do you trust? Terry Rozier is some combo, but we know that he's not a point guard. It gets tough. I mean, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's, I look at this game and I think back to that Detroit Pistons game, not the last Detroit Pistons game, but the one two before that when they went to, the one before the last one, when they went to OT, when LaMelo had just come back and then he fouls out. And then in overtime, Terry Rozier and Kelly Oubre kind of take over, but they don't take over in a good way. They take over in a bad way. They just dribble the air out of the basketball and they turn it over, and they lost an opportunity to win that OT game. That kind of happened at several points in this game where they really couldn't grab momentum. I think back to the third quarter when Mark Williams had that great chase down block on Chris Paul, and then they bring it up the floor and Kelly Oubre takes this ill-advised shot early in the shot clock, the three-pointer that led to a Booker easy dunk, and you could just see Clifford going, that's not the play we want. There were multiple times where Kelly Oubre and Terry Rozier, they're feeling the pressure of having to replace LaMelo Ball. I think they've got to find some ways where it's not one guy or two guys trying to take over. They're running the offense through multiple players. I mean, Bryce McGowan's only got 2 shot attempts. You know, I think there's got to be more for him. I understand why you want Gordon Hayward doing more ball distribution opportunities because LaMelo's out, but I think you've got to feed him in better places as well. So, yeah, I mean, and obviously we speculated that it was going to be tougher for Mark Williams offensively without LaMelo. He was 4 of 10. Like, there are a lot of problems that they have to work through without LaMelo. But I think one of the problems they have to figure out is, like, how do we keep this from being Terry Rozier and Kelly Oubre trying to play hero ball while at the same time understanding that both of those players have to score and have to play well or the offense will be terrible.
Yeah, let's finish up some of the observations, including Mark Williams, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Young guys are getting run, and we can discuss a little bit more about what Steve Clifford had to say after this game against the Phoenix Suns. One more segment, Locked On Hornets on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Is Locked On Hornets.
Are we sure that like everyone interprets a handful as 5?
I think so. Honestly,
I would say a handful is normally 5, but
I would agree.
4 is acceptable.
I'm going to hold 5 things in my hand. Look, 1, this is a pen, a book. I got a phone. Yeah, you guys are actually right. It's getting pretty full.
Yeah, I know.
Here's a cable. 5.
Okay, that's 5. That's 5.
And here's a coffee cup.
What else?
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, we got to do our Mark Williams hit every single day. It was kind of he has filled the LaMelo Ball quota where we have to talk about LaMelo, deservedly so. But now we have to talk about Mark because that's the exciting part of this season, the first round pick entering the rotation and playing well, despite clearly having some of the rookie problems that every first year player goes through in the association. You're right, Doug. I think last night offensively, you can tell just how much LaMelo helps Mark Williams. You know, not many lobs, there's in the pick and roll. There's not a whole lot of created space for Mark because people are worried about LaMelo Ball. On the pick and roll, this is what I felt about Mark Williams the entire time. He just doesn't dive hard right now. And I don't know how much of that is waiting for the decision to be made by the ball handler. I want to watch Mark really explode out of the gate after the screen is set. And I just feel like I don't know how much of that is just a lack of athleticism because for his size, Mark is pretty quick. It's just when you're 7'7", maybe he's just not rolling to the rim as fast as, some of the 6'10" athletic lob alley-oop guys that sometimes you can see in the pick and roll. But I want him to explode out of the gate a little bit more. Did see pick and pops, a couple mid-rangers that were just nothing but net, man. That guy has a really nice touch. We've seen it all season. Saw a couple there. So 2 of the 4 made field goals were pick and pops. What did you make of Mark Williams' performance, Doug?
I thought it was really good. 4 of 10, it wasn't a great offensive night, but I thought he had some moments there where he was showing you his range. And the range is important because they were sinking down. And again, that's the knock-on effect of not having LaMelo Ball is that teams, we saw this early in the season when he was out, teams were like, oh, okay, we're just going to make you shoot because we're not going to let you get to the rim because we don't think you can shoot. And so Mark Williams having that shot, I think it's giving us a little bit of a glimpse into a future where he could knock down threes at some point. But I thought the best play from Mark Williams was in the third quarter when there was a pick and roll play for Mark Williams. He rolls, he grabs it from Terry Rozier, and then he kicks it out to the corner for 3. And to me, that's the next level for Mark Williams. It's about him getting the roll and being effective at the rim. But if he can kick it out to the corner effectively like that and see the court a little bit better, that's going to be huge. That was a great play. Look for it. 5-12 in the third quarter.
I don't want to do this thing for Mark's entire career where we compare him to Jalen Duren. It's going to happen subconsciously. I don't want to do it, though. I will say, during the pre-draft process, when I really liked Mark Williams, but liked Jalen Duren better, one of the big gaps was the passing ability. And Mark has shown you in the last couple of games, the dude can dish some dimes out there. Against Detroit, there were 2, and including the one that LaMelo got hurt on. And then you mentioned the corner that Mark Williams is starting to look for. It's starting to come together pretty damn quickly, just like every time we've seen Mark from start to finish, the guy always improves. Nick, how impressed have you been with Mark Williams' play, and just how much do you think he's going to have to be a factor down the stretch for this team?
Yeah, I think you said it right there, Walker, is you are watching a player get better in real time. And this time it's been a tough season. He obviously wasn't in the mix for the first part of this season, but you're seeing whatever was part of the development early and what is still part of the development, you are seeing it work itself out on the floor. When I met Mark Williams before the season, listen, I didn't know if he was going to make it out of Greensboro, halfway through. Like, we knew that was kind of the journey for him. But what you could tell was that he's highly intelligent and he's highly coachable and he wants to get better. And he has every time out on the floor. For the last 5 games, he's got double-digit rebounds. Obviously, the monster game the other night with 20 rebounds, that's been really good to see from him. He always seems to have kind of a play that, you remember when you leave the arena. Last night, it was the chase down block of Chris Paul. I mean, dude ran like a deer, timed it perfectly, didn't foul. I mean, a veteran going to the cup. I mean, who knows what he's doing to try to draw contact in that moment. He did a great job. Yeah, there's still some things to work on. Yes, it would have been nice if he had LaMelo these last 18 games to continue to work out that pick and roll. And you're not going to be able to replace that with anybody else on the team to really develop it the way you want to over these last 18 games. But he's learning in real time. He's getting valuable experience. He's going up against guys that it's good that he's going up against. He's had some big time matchups. There was a moment in the Suns game where he went up against Kevin Durant and kind of like learned the hard way of what not to do because Durant got a pretty easy block on him. So he'll learn from all that.
You got two blocked him twice.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. The first one was kind of funny. Like you could almost see it in Mark's face. Like, okay, shouldn't have done it that way. But I just love how he's improving right before our eyes. And whatever you want to compare him to, he's good for this organization going forward.
Yeah, I tweeted this out. Every time Kevin Durant's in town, that's the one that's freaky height. I mean, I can't get used to it. Yeah. It's so stupid. I mean, watching him play on the court, and then he moves obviously like he's 6'3", handles it. We know it's what makes Kevin Durant so special. Yeah. But then you're in person and you see DeAndre Ayton walk through the tunnel, and then you see Kevin Durant, who is equal height to DeAndre Ayton. And DeAndre Ayton, by the way, crazy athletic big. Exactly why he was drafted number 1 overall over Luka Doncic and then Marvin Bagley, the bad pick. But having DeAndre Ayton go over Luka and be that athletic body, and then, here's KD, the guard version of that body, except way skinnier and as skilled as anybody you could find. That's hilarious. And then you're right, Doug, 2 blocks. It was the same damn play. It was on the block or short corner at the same exact spot on the baseline, and Mark tries to go over his left shoulder twice. Kevin Durant, it was part him getting to the basketball quickly, and also the fact that he's got an 8-foot wingspan, and also himself is 7 foot. Mark did learn the hard way twice, and I guess didn't try it a third time. Didn't learn after the first time.
Well, he probably just, everything's moving fast for Mark. It's his first time in the NBA. Maybe he's not paying attention to the jersey number. Look, it's a new, seeing Kevin Durant in his son's jersey is a weird. He probably is just not registering. Is that Kevin Durant? And then he feels the guy on his hip, right? And Kevin Durant's not like a beefy guy. I got a mismatch here. And then he, flips it around and is like, oh, no, this is not a mismatch. There were 3 freaks on the court because it was Mark Williams, it was Kevin Durant, and it was Kai Jones. And I thought, there was one play where Kai Jones actually contested a Kevin Durant 3, and I thought made a miss. And I'm like, man, there's only a couple of guys that have the just physical ability to actually challenge a Kevin Durant 3. Kai was one of them. But then, of course, Kevin Durant, he learns quickly and was able to bait Kai and get him on a fake on a mid-range and get him to foul. So, Kai learned some lessons too. But the thing with Mark, and this is what surprised me, is how quickly Mark is learning. I expect that he's a smart guy, and everything I'd heard from Steve Clifford, great work ethic. Steve had watched him at Duke and was confident that Mark was going to figure it out. But I thought Mark would figure it out in year 2. He's already starting to figure it out, and that should excite Hornets fans everywhere.
It's the point I've been hammering home constantly about Mark. Like Nick just talked about it. any portion of basketball he's played. Freshman year, last 10 games, awesome. Sophomore year, NCAA tournament, awesome. Greensboro, Summer League. Go to whatever stretch of basketball. And Mark Williams finished that stretch better than he began it. And it's happening right here. And
Clifford
Nick's right,
loves
too.
Those guys. He loves finishing better than you start. That's his lifeblood. That's what he gets. He eats cereal in the morning, and in it he pours a milk that says getting better than you were when you started the season.
That's the milk he's drinking?
Yeah, so he draws it on the milk. I don't know why he does it, but that's what he eats in the morning. That's what he eats for breakfast.
Nick told us he was reporting. He was live at the scene at his breakfast table, and then decided to tell us that. But last thing, Nick's right about the crazy plays that you see from Mark. You get one or two every game, and that's what's exciting. I mean, there is a awesome highlight from Mark every single contest. The Chris Paul chase down, the layup in transition was tough. I mean, no, he didn't slam it, but it was a tough layup. So really like what you're getting from him, and I really like what we're getting from Nick every single week. I was going to end it there, but now it's weird. Go ahead, Doug. You got something to say.
Well, because here's what I want. I have a request for Steve Clifford. Even if PJ's not back, PJ's coming back eventually. Please play DSJ more with Mark Williams. Please start DSJ with Mark Williams.
100%.
DSJ threw a great lob to Kai Jones. I want to see him doing that more with Mark Williams. And also, we cannot end this episode without mentioning, and I don't know how many people saw this because it got a little out of hand in the fourth quarter, but Dennis Smith Jr. blocked Kevin Durant's shot. And this wasn't a guard getting like a help block when you like just, maybe they counted as a block, but it really was like a steal. This was DSJ 1v1 with Kevin Durant in the corner. Kevin fakes, drives on Dennis Smith. Dennis Smith stays on his hip and jumps about as high as he did to get that dunk that he had in Miami. He jumped about that high to legitimately block Kevin Durant's shot. It's one of the craziest things, and nobody's going to notice it. Nobody's going to see it.
Levitate. That guy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's nuts. Well, you know what sucks? He spoke after the game, and I wanted to ask the question, but they were not taking many questions last night, and everybody was only there to see Kevin Durant. And so Steve Clifford answered 4. I got 1 or 2 in. I got one about Gordon Hayward pick and roll. And then Dennis Smith Jr. comes in. I was going to ask him about blocking Kevin Durant, whether that was some kind of individual accomplishment. He answered 3 questions, done. I mean, which is fine, but just, he walked out, and then, I asked Terry a couple, but I wanted to ask him about that play. He did not go low and do the cheat block thing where he blocks it before he brings it above his waistline.
Nope.
Dennis Smith Jr. challenged that. That guy, man, if he can just hit, I don't know what, 40%. He's getting to the free throw line, by the way, 4 attempts in the last 3 games at least. So Dennis Smith Jr. is a player. Love what you're getting from him this season. All right. That's Nick Carboni. He joins us every single week. Follow him on Twitter at Nick Carboni, WCNC. We always appreciate it, man. Thanks for the time once again.
Yeah, thank you guys. Feel better, by the way, and long-time listener. So you guys have both been kind of phlegmy. Is this transmissible through the 3 box here? Or
are you speaking for the listeners and saying, get our bleep together? Is that what you're saying right now?
Well, hey, hold on a minute. Because you're on television. You have to be at your best, both vocally and just physically be at your best often enough. Do you have any trade secrets? Like, what's your secret for getting over this time of year when the weather changes and your throat locks up?
Yeah, I just make the other person go on TV. Just make Ashley.
I can't do that. I am the other person.
That's how it is. Well, and then with the reads, right? That's what happens with our lovely sponsors, the people that make all of this possible. I'm going through the reads, and then I'll try to go. Sometimes I can, if it's pre-planned, I can go to the other person. But if I start to lock up during a read, Doug just laughs at me. He doesn't pick it up. He just points and laughs like he's Nelson and I am a victim on The Simpsons. That's what happens.
Listen, I admire you guys. Nobody's taking you guys off the court. You guys aren't coming out of the game. That's what I love about you guys.
Nick knows, man.
True.
That's why we have him on every single week. We
Iron
appreciate it once again. Thanks to you for making us your first listen every day. You can catch us anywhere you get your podcast. Make your second listen. Locked On Game to Game. They cover every game from across the association. You can catch that, again, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.